Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us. Greeting to us all. The Honorable, the co-chair of the Local Education Group, or the representative, Ibu Anissa Felicia, Director of Centers of Educations and Policy, or PSPK, and the team, and the Honorable, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the member of MPI, or Local Education Group, and as well as responder and KREASI partner and KREASI team. First of all, allow me to express my highest appreciations and gratitude to all the co-chairs and the consultant team of PSPK for your support in organizing this disseminations event for today. Allow me to open my remark with pantun, limericks. Roses are red, violets are blue. Study baseline to support evidence to improve the quality of education. Roses are red, violets are blue. With this baseline study, the program will be stronger for literacy and numeracy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a literacy and education program for the children of Indonesia. This is a joint commitment to accelerate the quality of literacy and numeracy in children characteristic in the preschool level, and as well as the primary and junior high school, and as well as madrasah ibtidaiyah that is implemented in 8 districts in 4 provinces in Indonesia. The KREASI program funded by GPE, Global Partnership for Education, and it will be held until 2028. And actually, it has been started since 2024. So at the end of 2024, this program has started, and then it will be ended in 2028. Apart from GPE, other supporters from this KREASI program, it is also supported by Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, or DFAT, from Australia. Thank you very much, Madian, for joining with us here. And then carried out by Save the Children in Indonesia, and along together with the Save the Children of Australia, from the mandate of co-chair of the MPI, or the local educations, from the Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the initial study that we disseminate for today, this has become the important foundations to ensure that all the program interventions designed with evidence base. And this study held collaboratively with our colleague from the Center of Education and Policy as the independent research partner. We would like to extend our highest appreciations to all the researchers from PSPK for the deep depth of analysis in this study. And apart from that, as well as their commitment and methodology that provide a credible data and contextual to improve the policy and education's practice. This study comprehensively has portrayed the initial literacy, numeracy, and student characteristic, and as well as implementations of curriculum, learning practices in the school and madrasa, the child protection system, the GEDSI, disability and social inclusions, or GEDSI, and as well as the response for the climate change and the education issues. Those aspects that has been portrayed comprehensively, it is part of the components of KREASI program that currently has been running. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the initial findings showed that the improvement of a learning process is not only about the curriculum and the teaching method. It is the result from the ecosystem strengths entirely. Start from the teacher capacity in order to implement differentiate teaching method, and then the effective child protection system, and as well as the responsive environment that's evidence based. That's why our today's event, it's not just a disseminations for the research result, but then we hope that today's activity, it is our joint validations room to ensure that these findings truly reflect the reality on the ground, and as well as to enrich the analysis with the perspective of central government and the local government, and as well as the development partners. It is also a space to formulate a concrete measure to determine a target about the result of our program in the future. We do believe that in the national education transformations, and there is study-based research. It is not only something that we need, but then this is something very important to address the gap, to understand the root cause, and as well as design an effective and sustainable intervention. Moving forward, this result will become or stepping stone to determine the target and the result of the program, strengthening the learning, differentiate learning implementations method, and then how to integrate the GEDSI, and as well as addressing the climate change and strengthening the child protections in the teaching unit. We do really hope that the collaborations from the central government, local government, the research agency, and all the stakeholders will strengthen the inclusive and equal education system and addressing the global challenges and focusing about the achievement holistically. And allow me to close this remark by summarizing that the success of program, it's not measured with many activities that carried out, but then how big is the real change that has been felt, the impact by the children at school. And these changes can only be made possible if we move together with aligned commitment and then evidence-based policy. Again, thank you very much for your presence and your attendance, ladies and gentlemen. We do really hope that today's discussions will strengthen our movement, how the children of Indonesia will have a strong education system and inclusive and sustainable. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right, thank you very much. Ibu Alifa, please stay on stage. Ibu, thank you very much, Ibu, for your opening remark. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, next we are going to listen the remarks that will be conveyed by Ibu Nisa Felicia, PhD, as the Executive Directors of Center for Education and Policy. Ibu Nisa, over to you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, of course, I would like to extend my gratitude to KREASI team, Save the Children Indonesia, Save the Children Australia, for the opportunity given to PSPK to be involved in this very crucial study, specifically how we can learn and as well as listen, how the teacher and as well as the students who are located in quite remote area far from our reach. So this is something very crucial for PSPK to learn about how the education is running in many places in Indonesia, specifically in this 8 district that already selected. Yeah, here we're talking 5 minutes, but then those who have been working in the past 8 months, so many of them, yeah, start from Nias, Tanggamus, Pesisir Barat, Kayong, North Kayong, Ketapang, Halmahera, North Halmahera, and Morotai, right? And then 8 district with the scope of study, which is also quite wide, start from the learning, leadership, and GEDSI perspective, and as well as climate change as well. It is also used in this study in that spread and many area. I am proud and truly thankful to work with all of the team from PSPK, how they still have a strong commitment to maintain that the methodology, the result from the study, will still be able to provide real information to be able to identify the needs and as well as the pinpoint on the local level so that it can be an input for the program of KREASI to make an intervention. And of course, I would like to express my gratitude as well because this is a great opportunity for us in PSPK so that we can always continue to advocate the policy that's truly relevant with the local level needs and then how it can protect the interests of the children. So that's why with the expectations that this finding, it's not just a baseline for the project that is run by KREASI, but then it can also be something that we can reflect, that we can assess, be it in the central government and local government policy. I would like to introduce you to the team. Yeah, I'm just going to speak 5 minutes here, so I don't know what the study is about in the detail. I'm going to welcome Angela first as the leader of PSPK team to do this. And I'm so sorry I couldn't as Pak Hakim and Mas Nino were actually become an advisor because both are not here. And then Stephen, we have Stephen who are also visit the field, Fatia. We have Dinda as well. Ivan. Nah. Who else? All men. And for those of you who are joining online, please open your camera so that we can document or we can take a picture of our event in this afternoon. All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please kindly be seated. Take a picture of our activity this afternoon and we also welcome all of you who are joining online, and we would like to inform you that on each table, ladies and gentlemen, there's already a QR code provided for the digital documents contains of report and presentations, and then QR for the feedback for our activity in this afternoon. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please kindly fill out the feedback of today's sessions by scanning the QR code that has been provided on each table. All right, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the core sessions of today's event, namely the presentations of research result that will provide a comprehensive overview that has been mentioned by Ibu Afifa and Ibu Nisa, a comprehensive view and analysis and reflections and a follow-up moving forward. To guide the course of these sessions, joining with us our moderator, Mr. Pratya Pratama, Director of Inspirasi Foundations. To Mr. Pratya Pratama, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Moderate this session in Indonesia. So in the case that you need to hear the translation, seems like not many of you will need it. You can access or borrow the device or the seat table. So I'll be the moderator. Exact. I will be also acting here, making sure also everyone is involved in this discussion. And please bear with me in the next few hours. And even though it was already explained earlier, allow me to provide a context of how today's discussion will run, but I will provide you with the possible content of the presentation. So this baseline study is conducted to obtain the initial condition as a baseline study, including the student outcome on foundational skill, numeracy, literacy, and character development. So in addition to at the students level, but the condition of the education provider in the 8 target districts of KREASI program. So it's interesting to look at the two aspects of this study. So we're looking at the supply side, the education provider, and also looking at the recipient side, the students. So this scope will be focusing on 4 main areas. You can actually learn about this yourself in more in depth, but I will give you a prelude about the 4 main components of this. First is about the curriculum and assessment and the teaching practices and the headmaster's leadership and the child protection or child safeguarding. So they are the 4 components involved, and the integration of GEDSI principles and the change of climate, which is also part of the baseline study in our data collection. We also want to remind you that the result of this baseline study mainly serve as a reference for the development of the KREASI program intervention in the future. So later on, we will have an interesting discussion in addition to have some panelists sitting in front. As a participant, you can also provide response. So during the session of dialogue, we can have an exchange. I'm sure like all of you from your own institutions can provide an insight that can serve as a good practices in the next program, and also to relevance to the policy, as we have here the presence of the Director General of Islamic Education and from the Director General of the Primary and Secondary Education. And in this occasion, I'm going to also introduce to you the field researcher from PSPK, Pak Steven Pratama, PSPK researcher who is also involved in the groundwork and has a background of sociology education. So it's interesting to look at the sociology approach in identifying the problems of education. And secondly, we have Mbak Fatia Nurrahmani. Would you please come forward, Ibu? She has a background on the background study and the psychometric evaluation and data utilization. So let us now give time to these two presenters. And if you look at the timeline, the presentations by these two speakers will be in the course of an hour. They will have an hour to share all of their findings. And later after the presentation, there will be a Q&A session. So this is quite a long session. So during the presentations by the presenter, any thoughts that flash in your mind, you can jot them down to make sure like you won't forget them, and then you can address that during the Q&A. So I guess that's that. And now I'd like to give floor to Mbak Fatia and Pak Steven. Peace and blessings to all of us. Thank you, Patria. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope in this month of Ramadan, at this very hour, you can still direct full concentration and provide full participation during the session. So in this occasion, I'd like your permission to share you the result of our baseline report studies that we have conducted. So as shared earlier, I'll start with a story that we have from our field visit. So I happened to visit 8 districts in 3 big provinces in Indonesia: Nias, Tanggamus, Pesisir Barat, Ketapang, Kayong Utara, Halmahera Utara, and Morotai. Stephen and I find this is such a great opportunity to look at and discuss with schools, with the students, with the school's leader, and local organizations to learn what is actually happening on the ground. We got an opportunity to visit 248 education unit, including the early education and elementary education, primary education. Here, 5,773 local government, and local organization. And the purpose of the KREASI baseline study is to picture the preliminary condition of the quality of the education quality, the learning practice, and the child safeguarding aspect. And we were also looking to find what is actually happening on the ground and whether or not what kind of policy draft. And so in doing this, we are used for pillars: curriculum and assessment, learning practices, education unit leadership, and child setting. So these are 4 main pillars that help to support equal education and in accordance with the needs of every child. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The study using quantitative and qualitative method, whereby we conducted survey the students, assess the students, and having an in-depth discussion with teachers. And we use a lot of method to conduct the study. We also conducted observation they were not exposed with the foundation that they need to continue to the basic or primary education. And when we look at the result of the students' assessment, such as critical thinking or problem solving, the outcome is the lowest, and the result is consistent among the 8 districts that we visited. And then we find that in addition to numeracy, motoric, socio-emotional, apparently the skills are found to be very low. And when we look at the preschool's result of our survey, if you look at the socioeconomic status, there is a significant difference among those who come from a low economic background and well-off economic background. So we look at the outcome based on the economic background. The literacy and the motoric skills or capacity shows such a big discrepancy. So, students from the middle, upper, and middle lower class are very different. So when we look at this this gap is very significant. So when we look at the literacy skill, the numeracy skill, and the motoric skills, they are very low compared to those who come from a middle upper background. So let us continue to the primary education level. So apparently the pattern started to shift. If on the first one, the socioeconomic status really influenced the outcome of the students, apparently on this stage, the socioeconomic status is not very influential. But if you look at the spread of the outcome among the different regions, the outcome are quite varied, and it's even more varied than the preschool achievement. And especially if you look at the regions, there are regions with a very high achievement versus very low achievement in terms of literacy, numeracy, and character development. You will see the difference in the different regions. So what we assess here are the fourth grader. So we found discrepancy or shift of the achievement between the elementary school versus the preschool. And then here, the SIS is not as dominant or not as influential to the outcome for the students, but the variations, the result are still very big. These are coming from the 8 districts that we visited. And if you look further, the instructional condition is very influential, such as how the teacher teach, the infrastructure available, and the curriculum and method of teaching becomes one of the most influential factor for the primary education level. So if you look further, what actually is the most challenging domain in the elementary school? Apparently, for elementary school, the most challenging one is numeracy. For the early childhood, literacy is challenging. But what's interesting in this elementary school is that numeracy across the 8 districts are low. So the results are quite consistent in the different districts. If earlier it was the socioeconomic status that influenced the result, in here the discrepancy is based on gender and disability. And here, female students have a higher achievement than the male students. And then here you'll see the student identified as disability in terms of numeracy, having a big gap with those who are not identified. So with those who are in preschools, in elementary schools or primary schools, I mean, you will see the trend is quite different. My colleague will share the presentations on other domain, but maybe you will also learn on the cause of why is this happening. So once we found out about the students' outcome, we actually research further on how schools adapt the national curriculum against the local context. And apparently, there are quite a lot some students might have disability, or the geographical conditions of the school might not in line with what is that in the textbook. So I find a lot of schools just follow the curriculum as is. And so we also survey the school principals. We survey how they draft the curriculum for their education unit. And apparently, most of the way they formulate the curriculum is not so much based on the student's characteristic, but mostly based on the institutionalizations. First of all, in terms of the vision and the mission. So when they draft the curriculum, they are referring to the vision and mission of their education unit. And secondly, they look at the availability of the means and infrastructure. These two are the primary considerations for the principals and formulating the curriculum. But less than 2% of the school's principals that we met apparently factor in the socioeconomic status, the condition of the students' aspiration, and the disability status of the students. So yeah, again, the drafting of the curriculum for the education unit, only 20% of them referring to that principles. And then in terms of how the local context are factored in, we find different gaps also from one to another. Most of them said that they are already adapting the local context, but it's not that in depth. And in fact, we found up to 30% of schools never adapt the local context while referring to the national curriculum. So this is a very interesting finding. It is not just the learning outcome that they have to take into account, but they have to actually factor in the context of the students and the local economy. And these two factors, as a part of the curriculum formulations, are not very much seen. And next is the climate education. Apparently, for climate education, it is very much fragmented and unplanned. Why is this happening? When we visit the field, when we ask what is climate change or climate education, their understanding is limited to earthquake or short-term weather, but not so much on the overall climate change. And in terms of the implementation of the policy, it is very much revolved around the disaster mitigation. In fact, a mitigation that already happening, such as when we went to North Nias Utara and North Nias, the school teach the students on the effect of flood, how to avoid flood. But then we asked, what did they do to bring awareness up to the students prior to the disasters that takes place? And apparently the activity has been done, such as planting trees or cleaning the schools, but a lot of the students do not really understand as to why they did such activity. And so when we ask the school principals, do they have plan in terms of climate education, 56% said yes, they have factor in climate educations. But the 56% that said yes, it is only a survey that they are conducting, but not so much on the emission mitigation or climatology approach. So you see there, the students are planting the chili trees. Or so when we ask, what's the connection between planting these chili trees and climate mitigation? So this was our question as well. And whether planting chilies will reduce carbon dioxide. Can this chili be used for the food security purposes? And apparently, this is something that is not holistically understood. And even though we found the effort of schools to plant matoa trees in one of the regions that we visited for the purpose of reforestation, but due to the long dry season, the tree didn't grow. The climate change defeat this effort, and yeah, the trees were not treated or were not nurtured. So apparently, this type of activity is very much short term. So in terms of curriculum and assessment, there are several recommendations and studies that are necessary to be done moving forward. First, it is necessary to look at the competence level of the school principals and teachers in drafting a holistic learning for a foundational skills, which is on literacy, numeracy, and character development. And you need to also look at the assessment system and how this can be utilized to form a learning priority selected by teachers in class. Whether teachers we use the assessment result, assessment in school, or assessment in the national or regional level. And it is necessary also to conduct evaluation of the adaptation transition process from preschool to elementary school or madrasah or Islamic education. So these are the results of our assessments. But as a reminder, everyone, in order to have good curriculum, we need to have holistic education. We need to have holistic learnings as well in the education unit. And so my partner Steven will share on the learning practices and the leadership in the education unit. Okay, next slide, please. And so in terms of the learning practice, I will share to you about 5 things. First is the differentiated learning, and then 2 slides on GEDSI, and slides on the education on climate change and the development of teachers' capacity. So first slide is on the differentiated learning. When teachers is asked, majority of them said, "Oh yeah, I have conducted differentiated learning. I have just the complexity of teaching method with the readiness of the students, and I have applied different teaching method to the different students with different learning needs." But when we ask the school principals, 70% of the school principal mentioned that my teachers still need capacity building. Only about 20% of teachers deemed by the school principal having the competence to conduct differentiated learning. So there's one class that I visited as well. So this is for mathematics, for math. So teacher said, "Oh yeah, I conducted differentiated learning." Yeah, at a glance, this was happening. In fact, some students who were not able to divide learning about how to divide, but some of the students who are not mastering division, but then given the quizzes on divisions, and those who are already mastering divisions can proceed to the different subject. But in terms of how the result of our observations, when the teacher had handed over the quizzes or tests, they didn't do any follow-up actions in terms of the abstracts, the logic, with their daily life. And behind all this, when I asked teachers, also, ladies and gentlemen, I asked teachers, did you find any challenges in conducting differentiated learning? And their answer is yes. A majority of them said, "Oh yeah, I find it difficult to conduct differentiated learning because I have very limited teaching material." Some teachers said, "Oh, I don't even have time to prepare the teaching material, let alone prepare the differentiated learning." So what are the challenges? Apparently, it's the administrative thing that makes them having very limited time. And secondly, some teachers said, "Oh yeah, because my students have very significant learning disparities, and I don't know how to handle that." And so next, I will share about GEDSI. So yeah, this is about the learning practices. So in terms of learning practice, there are 3 things that we efforted to explore in the study that conducted. First is on the gender representative in the teaching material or in textbook, such as like teachers might share about this by using videos or having this material in their presentation. And next is on the use of the mother language. And the next is on the exposure to disability in teaching material. So 50% of the teachers being surveyed mentioned like, "Oh yeah, so in terms of gender, they only incorporate male and female as part of gender, so it's not that inclusive. And also majority of teacher told us that the male works to be a leader, a male going to work, meanwhile female spend time in the kitchen. So even among teachers, they have the imagination that male and female needs to be looked equal, but in the reality they're not having equal role. So that's in the context of work. But what about in the context of sport? In the context of sport, teachers said, oh yeah, actually, female can also play basketball, play soccer. It's not just male that play football, soccer, or basketball. And and then, if female students play this sports, they will have blisters. But the male students can also have blisters, right? So yeah, in their mind, they understand, but it's not really being applied into practice. And next, on the facility of learning, I mean, a majority of teachers mentioned that they have used the mother tongue and or the teaching material using the mother tongue. But then when we investigated further, apparently the use of mother tongue in class is accidental. So it's unplanned without incorporating a more systematic diagnostic, without really thinking to what extent I need to help my students by incorporating native mother tongue. Is it through the teaching material, through the reading material, and so on and so forth? So again, the incorporation of the mother tongue is accidental. And next, even more than 50% of teachers said that the challenge of incorporating mother tongue in their teaching is that a very limited access to the teaching material. So these are the answers of coming from the 44% of teachers. And in terms of disability, almost 50% of teachers being surveyed recognize that in their teaching material they don't provide visualization about the different type of disability. If we ask the teachers as to why they don't incorporate that, oh yeah, we just actually follow what is actually provided by the textbook. If it's not there in the textbook, and there's nothing else that we did. So they didn't have initiative to look for images or illustrations that somehow represent the variety of disabilities, so students are exposed to different type of disabilities. So these are something that the teachers have not done. So let's go to the next slide. This is about disability.
So the majority of teacher during the survey, they say that, oh yeah, in my classroom for the teacher who teach children with disability, the majority said, yes, we are at classroom. We do not have any assistive technology. We are not assisted with the GPK teacher or a special skilled teacher. But then, if it is just looking at the number without looking at the context, this is going to lead into a problem. Or let's say that, oh, perhaps you are not the one who try to find out what the needs of the children with disability. After we try to find out, there is a systemic problem, which is the disability or unit services. It's not being formalized yet or not even functioned well because due to several reasons, perhaps due to the limitations of budget, or let's say that the policy are still during the draft process. And turns out that the implications for because of that reason, there is no diagnosis of the children with disability, there is no analysis of their need, and it's just teacher initiatives only. And then at the end of the day, the teacher felt like it's lacking of facilities and infrastructure for them. We observed two classes. Within these two classes, there are children who have special need that has been identified with disability. The teacher said one experienced speech delay and epilepsy. So in this class, they said that, yeah, I asked the teacher, and then they said that, yeah, I do not have any qualifications. It's just I am a special needs teacher, just yeah, accidentally. And then this is during one of the religious courses. And then he just sit on the table. And then these children who have identified with epilepsy, they just, yeah, sit there, and then the teacher just come and try to calm him down, and then just like that. There is no teacher who identify themselves or considered as GPK or special need teacher. Let's go to the next slide. And this is about the climate change, ladies and gentlemen. So the majority of teacher, if I ask them questions, oh yeah, we have integrated the climate change in our material through intracurricular and then mix intra with extra or co-curricular only. And then the way to do it are varied as well. Some of them tell stories for the kindergarten through song or a real actions or using the video, for example. And we have a very interesting example in one of the kindergarten, how they learn about the rain cycle. The teacher explained about the rain cycle and what is it linked with the climate and so on and so forth. And then they do experiments, ladies and gentlemen, how the rainwater fall down, and then if there is anything happened, and then they also learn about flood. They take stone and everything, so the kindergarten students can do that, which is very good. And through the climate change, they also start learning about words like cloud and other. So that's pre-literacy and numeracy. But then, like what has been mentioned by Fatia earlier, the basic understanding of teacher related to the climate change itself, it's not comprehensive yet. For example, from the survey, more than 50% said that the climate change, it is a natural factor. There is no link with the human behavior. More than 50% teachers said that. And once we discuss with the teacher furthermore, we ask them what's climate change, and they say that, oh yeah, it's a weather. The weather is changing now. Now it's more hotter, or the rain patterns is not the same. That's it. And there's no one mentioning about how it's also strongly linked with the greenhouse gas or the over excessive carbons like the food waste or other. Yeah, there is no one responding that way, even though that, yeah, during the learning and teaching process the teacher said it is due to the human behavior. Yeah, it's flood due to a lot of human activities, cutting the trees and all of that. It's just, yeah, rarely they mention that. And then lastly, I'm talking about the teacher capacity development. In teacher capacity development, next slide, please. In this part, it turns out that there's a lot of teacher has received learning differentiate training and literacy numeracy training and six aspect of developing. Yeah. So regarding the accommodations for the children with disability and the climate change, this is the list that they receive. And if I ask them a question, who's the one who provide the training the most or providing a technical guideline, this is the, yeah, answer from the local government, from the KKG, or from the development partners. But then if I ask questions, yeah, what is the training? Seems like so fun. They usually keep silent first, and then after that they need to look up to their notes. Yeah. And then, yeah, I was thinking that whether this is their honest answer or just copying the answer from their training. So the initial study said that their comprehensions about this basic knowledge is not really strong yet. So at least we have two recommendations moving forward. The first one in the future study, it is important to create a mapping about the understanding of teacher regarding the differentiate learning, because yeah, perhaps they also rejecting it. And the second thing, there's need to be a study for characteristic of competency development that help teacher to apply what is learned in the classroom context. And Next, we are talking about the leadership. In the leadership, I'm going to talk about five things. The first one is instructional leadership, and then the use of data in the planning, including the uh, education's report. And after that, the GEDSI. And then I'm also going to talk about how to integrate perspective of GEDSI in the education's planning. And lastly, talking about the climate change. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, yeah, the first one, if we ask the leader in the local government, they say that, yeah, we have implemented the instructional leadership well. And then we ask about their visions and missions. They said that, oh, my vision and missions already considered the need of the children and it is already in line with each area. Oh, my vision and missions have education orientations, right? And looking at the governance of curriculum, they said that, oh yeah, when we develop the curriculum of KSP, it's already have a local context and the readiness of the student, it's become our main considerations. If we ask them to rate 1 to 4, they said, yeah, 3. So when we ask them a question, so what about the role of the leader of preschool, elementary school, and other, if we ask them to rate, yeah, it's more than 3. Almost half of them say that the visions and missions of our education unit, it is the base to develop the curriculum of education unit or the operationals of curriculum in madrasa. But then once we check furthermore and then we ask to check with the KSP or the a curriculum, turns out that what they're doing, it's more likely administrative or normative. Yeah, it's just there. But then if we ask them further questions, then they got confused. So it is between, yeah, perhaps using the materials from others or, yeah. Sometimes, yeah, if we ask them why they want to increase literacy and numeracy, why not others? And they are confused because they cannot rationale that questions. And they say that, oh yeah, the students needs to read, needs to count. No, it's not that. It's mostly gone. Yeah. And then after that, if we are talking about visions and missions of them, based on the discussions, there is an indications that the leader of the education unit not involving teacher in this. So it's still top down in nature. And whatever they're doing, it's still variative. It's not equal between all the education institutions. And apart from that, there's also stories like the head of the elementary school or the head of madrasa, the role are not just to become a leader, but also replace the teacher. If the teachers does not come in, then they will replace. Or if the children cried, then the principals are also taking care of that. And let's go to the next slide, please. We are talking about the use of data. So the data could be the report data or other data, the result of assessment or any other data that can be utilized. So 90%, 90% the head of the education unit said that they has utilized education's report card data in planning the education unit program. They said that, oh, some of them all program made by the education's report card. But then when we explore more the program or the data related to the children and the gap, and the majority always considered that the literacy and numeracy aspect in program design. But then the perspective of gap that is not quite strong. So there's a lot of the head of educational unit, even though that they're already considered literacy and numeracy, but then they're not looking at the gap from the literacy and numeracy itself. To what extent the head of the education's unit utilize the data, let's say that assessment diagnostic, to look at disparity or gap, it's not toward that directions yet. So it's not appeared yet because still less than 40% the head of educational unit use those data. There will be a potential for them just to make it similar without looking at the aspect of gap and disparity. But then they say that if we're talking about the use of report card data, what is the implications, right? And there is implications, implementations, and other. They said that the main challenge is that we are lacking of budget. They said other challenges that they raise is they said that they do not understand enough about the use of report card data, and the local government still become a single actor to provide an assistance or facilities for the head of primary school and madrasa for this. So other actors in this ecosystems are not quite optimum yet to support the head of educational unit to understand the education's report card data in line with its functions. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now let's talk about the GEDSI aspect. The first one about the leadership of women and men, girls and boys. So what's very interesting here, ladies and gentlemen, the red one is the women, boys and girls. Begitu SD atau MI di dasar derajat baru mulai agak berimbang antara laki-laki dan perempuan. So once, yeah. Nah, kalau kami terus lebih jauh, sebenarnya di balik pola ini atau di balik dari. I'm sorry. This is the proportions of female hats on the educational unit. So for the preschool, it's a majority lead by women, and after that, in the junior high, it's starting to be equal. Why? Because they said that there is a domestic responsibilities and social norm, and it's become a double burden for the education's unit heads because after at home they need to take care of the kids, the house, and other. And the female leader face expectations to be the Wonder Woman, managing professional roles alongside household burdens without adequate support. And after that, they also expected a good result coming out of them. Because as we know that at home they're already tired, and then at school they also need to be performed. That's the real challenge. The illustrations is that, yeah, the head of the preschool and other, yeah, they are said to be a Wonder Woman to be able to do all of that. Yeah. So that's the illustration. And then the next factor is that why women uh, to become opportunity to become the principal in the preschool and RI is higher. And they said that, yeah, if you want to become a principal in the preschool or kindergarten, you have to be able to sing and dancing. So it's not possible for men to do that. So there's still some of that views thinking about that. Oh, yeah, it's okay that the principals are women. Yeah, it's not men does not want to do that. So that's the background. And let's say that there is one critical preschool or kindergartens, or if you read the quote during the interview, they said that the woman's mobility and opportunities tend to be more limited than men because, yeah, because they, even though their capacity and competence to hold leadership roles are compatible. Let's go to the next slide. About the integrations of GEDSI perspective. And let's look at this picture. The picture on the left talking about the false equality trap. we found out in some of the preschool and then elementary school, they said that, oh, we're already inclusive. We accept all children. It's okay. The children with disability, children who have a special need and other, we accept all of them as if they're inclusive. But then what's become our questions is that whether every children were treated the same or not. So they're confused then. There is no interventions or asymmetric intervention. And they just treated all similar. Once we're all surveyed to the education's unit, when we ask them a questions, what are the considerations when that you use in order to develop your program at your school? And they say that we considered the children's preparations and how they can speak Bahasa Indonesia. But then once we ask them whether they can use the mother tongue or other, and then they also become flustered. And then what about GEDSI in order on reflecting on your education's program? And they respond that, we lack of training. So we're not really truly understand about GEDSI or gender or disability or social inclusions. They felt like they still lacked of training. But then in the other hand, sometimes they also mention that our teachers have a really lack of get see perspective. So these two main challenges that we face when we are drafting the education's program that have JETSI perspective. And the next slide, this is the last slide talking about the climate change again. Yeah. And then the 65.9%, the head of educational unit reported that they develop a program related to climate change and mitigation, some adaptations. Yes, they planted tree and other. If I ask them questions, but if I ask them questions, can I look? And then they said that, oh yeah, the plant is already gone. Yeah, it's dead. The tree is dead already and others. And if I ask furthermore, what about the curriculum design? How to develop the children competency? Because we know that there are four competencies, right? The impact and then cause, adaptations, and mitigations. So which one that you develop? And then they couldn't answer that questions. If we ask them questions, yes, we are doing a green project, and then there is no proof sometimes. Yeah, it's more likely incidental, and it's not really long term to change the children's behavior. And if I ask them a questions from all of the climate change program, what are the factors, supporting factors? Yeah, if we're talking about the program in the context of climate change, at least there are five, right? There is a human capital. We need to have an awareness for the climate so that the program is sustained, running effectively. And then social capital, it needs to be involved. So many stakeholders so that the program run well. And then there has to be a political the capitals, and then how to have aligned vision and missions in education's program. And then what about the geographic situations, whether supporting the program that were selected? And lastly, the financial resources. From our survey, the head of education's unit, they said that from the survey and FGD, they said that most of the times we lack budget. We do not have enough budget to implement the program for environments or our climate change program. There is one a very interesting example in Kayong district. Turns out that the climate change already included into the local government policy. This is a lesson learned to conditions of school that the climate change are not only on the surface, but then it can be part or systematic agenda for the long term, to develop, to change the behavior of the children's and other, not only learn planting trees and then after that, what are the concrete measure after that? If the tree can absorb the carbons, and then how to reduce the methane gas. This is something that we expect to be more integrated in the program of education's unit. Let's go to the last slide. So from all of this finding, the further recommendations is that there has to be evaluations on the impact. how the instructional leadership and the database planning will have an impact in all process. And the second thing, I think we need to sit together to formulate the indicators. How is our way to detect to what extent the GEDSI principles can be integrated in the process of selections of the education's hats. What are the indicators looks like and what type of instrument that can be utilized that needs to be developed so that we can detect to what extent how the selection still bias or the selections yeah can be more equal. And then lastly, we also need to take a look at the role of higher education institutions in leadership development, because if you look at the report, the role of universities be developing the teachers' competencies and of course, it's always have a small presentations. Another topic about child protections. This is still become a debate. If I have a dialogue with the teacher, they said that, yeah, of course, you need to see the TikTok and then yeah. What about the practice? And next, Fatia will explain about this. Thank you very much, Ifan. We've seen previously about the challenges about how to achieve the learning at school and then the learning practice and leadership at school to become a foundations on the educations and a program. And lastly, we are talking about the issues of child protections. How about the policy implementations and how the teacher understanding and parents about the protections of children and what the relationship between the child protections and climate change. The first one is that the implementations of PPKSP regulations is not equal yet. When I said policy, this is the Ministry of Higher Education's number 36, and then the regulations of Ministry of Religious Affairs regarding the sexual abuse and sexual violence in the education space. If we ask a teacher, what have you done about the preventions of child sexual abuse? And then they say that, yeah, there has been standard operating procedures about the preventions on handling violence in educations, and then after that there's also availability of reporting system. The last questions when we ask whether it is functions about the preventions of violence, only 35%, yes, it's already functions. If we explore more, what are the 70%, 60%, and other, and what's the disseminations of information set, they say that, oh, we put up a banner. There shouldn't be any bully and violence. And yeah, uh, every time we had a Monday ceremony, you shouldn't be mocking your friends, and bully are not allowed. So that's what they meant through the socializations or disseminations of informations. And when we asked whether the teacher already received a training about this, they said yes. And then the SOP, once we check the SOP, yes, they have a document, but whether it has been run optimally or not, and the answer is no, no, not yet. And then when we ask them on the field, what happened if there's any violence? Well, experienced by the children, and they said that, oh, the children can report to the classroom teacher, and then after that, yeah, they just talk it out and done. So it's like still administrative in nature, and it's just prerequisite only. And the record, there is no clear record from the education's unit to take a record if there's any occurrence happen. Let's say that if the case is bigger and it involves parents or they're hurted badly or other, but then so far it's still administrative and incidental only. And the teacher, most of them said that there's still limited of facilities and infrastructures that is inclusive to support the environments that free the children from violence. If I yeah when I visit them, most of the bullying happens specifically for the children with disability. Yeah, they're like mocking each other. They said it was joking, but then there is one case in one school. These children unable to see. So these children have a disability which is blind, and then they start mocking these children with the disability, and then after that they've fought badly, and then yeah, the principals were like confused what they can do at that time, and then after that the school managed to form an SOP and then consult with the education's office about how to handle the violence happens in the education's unit. But then it happened after the incidents occurred. And then after that, the school tried to make an effort to draft not only an SOP, but then how to apply this as well.
Next. So when asked their understanding on the practice of anti-violence in household and in schools, apparently parents have quite a level of understanding and know that they shouldn't perform a violence against their children. And when we ask what type of actions that they should have done, parents said that they should also respect their children. They should not be authoritative, and they cannot just force kids to follow what they wanted. And parents felt like they already explained to their children about the regulations that can be easily understood at home. And parents also felt that the children are quite open, telling what they feel in home or at schools. And parents felt that they know how to regulate when there is a conflict with the children. And then when we investigated further, some parents still felt that when they don't hit their children, if they just insert positive disciplinary actions, children won't comply, children won't obey. So these type of things are found in many schools. And then apparently this happened for parents that are far from their children. They work in the plantations, they work at sea, and they let their relatives to take care of their children, and they don't really care about this type of things. And then in our survey, we found that parents still prefer to commit physical punishment when their children did not abide, that did not listen to them. And then when we asked teachers, what about in schools? Well, apparently in schools, teachers actually refuse extreme violence against children, and teachers understood the rules. Teachers understood the what kind of positive discipline that should do against the students. They shouldn't hit the students. They shouldn't conduct physical violence. But then the teachers got confused. Oh, well, now I cannot hit the students. Well, if that happened, I was gonna be summoned to the police. I was gonna be summoned to the principals. And so apparently when they decided to conduct such other actions, the students still disobey the teachers, and so the teachers find that this is a gray zone. Is it, well, in terms of disciplinary action, should they just lecture the students? Should they still conduct physical punishment? So teachers don't really understand on how they should discipline the students without committing physical violence. So the awareness is there, but practice-wise, it's not as consistent, and in terms of its progress. And then children become more vulnerable when they experience violence in the educational unit. Well, I also look at the socioeconomic status behind the violence that the students experience, and look at whether the children have disability or not, and what about the type of nurture performed to the kids. Um, and children are already vulnerable. in its nature, and what happened to the children students that then experience violence, and so there is a layer of violence that takes place. So that's why intervention, collaborations between teachers, sorry, family, education unit, community, and system are necessary. They should collaborate and work to safeguard the children, the child, so the child students will feel safe at schools, and then they in and then when we look at the education unit, some education unit have very low level of supervisory actions. I remember visiting one school. There's one aisle that I came across, and it was so dark. When I asked the teacher, did any violence have happened in the schools? Teacher said, "Oh no, we have zero violence here. In here, students don't fight, don't like to fight." But then when you ask the students, apparently the students that I interview experienced bully. The students were experienced bully by their seniors when in the dark alley, and then the teacher overlooked that. And so when I asked the students, "Did you report this to your teacher?" The answer was no. Why? Well, I'm afraid that my teacher will reprimand me. So it is quite contradictory answers that we found. Teacher said, "Oh, there is zero violence in schools," and students opposed that answer. No, there is a violence in school, and then this is something that we found when we visited schools. So I find that as teachers, we have to um, perform holistic oversights. What is actually happening to the students, whether in schools, whether in education unit, or at home. Next slide. So next, in terms of climate change, already explained to you that the climate change is still disaggregated with the need of child safeguarding, child protection. Here, there is no specific SOP that needs to be enforced in the event of the emergency of disaster. For instance, here, when I visited the field, there's the students that have difficulty in seeing. The students use a very thick glasses, and so the students when student when he or she walk needs to have assistance from friends. So then apparently the school is also existed in a flood prone area, and so I found that in several schools there is no specific SOP in place for the protection of schools in the event of disaster emergency. And the next is the disaster simulations. It only happened during rainy season, when it's flooding, when earthquake is happening again. All of this activity are quite accidental, and there is no team that handles violence or handling of violence established for that purpose only. And then when we look at the score for the preparedness in the event of disaster, the result is very low. Why? Because there is no collaboration among the different stakeholders that can formulate a system that can protect children in all situations, not just during the event of mitigation, but also in the event of disaster. We also come across a significant gaps or discrepancies in terms of the result of score. This is actually average score coming from the results of the survey to the 8 regions. And some regions have low scores, some regions have high scores in terms of the level of how prepared they are in the event of disaster. And then when we also visited the education unit, it's interesting that one area in Kayong Utara have a district leader and regulation in place in terms pertaining to the environment, protection of environment. So not only there's a regulations that is already issued, but it's already being applied as well in class in terms of climate change. And then in terms of the impact of climate change against the protection of children by the education provider, we find that there's a lot of this. First, it is because the zero collaboration between parties and the neglect to the psychosocial effect to the children in the event of disaster. They don't really want to observe whether did, did the students experience trauma or need of follow-up actions. So the response in the event of disaster is pretty much ad hoc. There is no mitigation plan, or when the students have trouble seeing in the event of disaster, will someone help this students, children, whether certain operations have to be done? Well, this type of thing is still zero. So when this type of things present, those children, those students become even more vulnerable. And so we also find that there is an absence of integrated service in the event of disasters and what type of child protection that should be performed. And therefore, our recommendations for the next study is it is necessary to have the evaluation on the impact of the newly issued regulations. What I meant by regulation is that at the moment, the regulations is is amended by using the current Ministry of Education regulations. And next, it is necessary to have integrated assessments pertaining to the system of child protection in the governance, reporting, and the referral mechanism in the education unit. I apologize. It is necessary to have longitudinal and comparative study to look at the discrepancy, success factor, and the strategy for the cross-region strengthening activity. Next, we need to strengthen the capacity of teachers and parents in the field of positive disciplinary and caring that is free from violence. Awareness is there, but the application is inconsistent. That's why we need to strengthen these actions so child protection's effort become holistic and cross stakeholder collaboration is there to support the learning activity or learning process for the children study or students in the education unit. Okay, my time is up. So we presented to you four pillars. We hope that this can be used for your reflections and evaluations, especially for the next KREASI program. That will be all from us. I hope it will be useful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mbak Fatia. Thank you, Pak Steven. Next, I'd like to invite you to come to the stage so audience can see you better. So distinguished participants, the next part of this discussion is to give an opportunity to five people who have asked to provide it feedback earlier. But then the feedback should not be limited to this five discussions. So once they provide their feedback, the response, those of you who are attending this event in person or online can also provide your feedback. So I would like to introduce to you all this responder, Dr. H. Abdul Basit, the Head Subdirectorate of Curriculum and Evaluation for Madrasah KSKK, for the Director General of Islamic Education from the Ministry of Religious Affairs. Okay, they're gonna be sitting with us, so it's kind of invisible. So please sit there. So next is Ibu Purwati, SPD MPD, the head of the Education Personal Development for the Education Office for Kayong Utara District of West Kalimantan Province. Next, we have Murni Leo. Sorry, Ibu Rasita from Inovasi, Pak Lukman from the head of Analysis Team and Policy Advocacy, PSKP. And then Ibu Murni Leo, the head of MLE, Monitoring Learning Evaluation from the Tanoto Foundation. So I already whispered to Pak Lukman to provide first response. So there are two responses that we want to hear. So I understood that the presentation was very comprehensive, very long. So you might share about one or two things that resonate to you the most, or Is there anything that you'd like to explore further so they can be used as the note for the researcher in the future? And next is also equally important is the implications on the intervention design in the future, particularly for KREASI. What kind of intervention that they should have? You have heard the condition. This becomes the basis for intervention moving forward. What kind of ideal intervention that we should aspire to have? So yeah, just two things, your feedback and the implications. We're very privileged here because we get a lot of input coming from the policy background and also from Inovasi, from TF, different background that we have here. You might have same but slightly different mm, experience as well. So that would be the two response that we'd like to hear from the discussions. But for all of the audience, you can share all types of feedback, all feedbacks that you'd like to share. Okay. So I guess that's that for now. Pak Lukman, just share a very brief response, Pak. You have 3 to 4 minutes before later on we can hear from the audience. Pak Lukman, over to you.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Harus contekan karena banyak banget.
So I have to bring my cheat sheet. I have a lot on my note, but I'm going to limit my response to efforts that have been done by the Center for Education and Policy Studies, PSKP. Apparently, a lot of the conclusions have similarities. So that serves as our joint issues. But Patria earlier mentioned that if that's the very issues that we have, what kind of intervention that we should have, we're looking forward to the interventions because the final recommendations coming from this type of program is the government can learn. First, in terms of the curriculum implementations or analysis against the result, is that the one that applies Merdeka curriculum is higher than those who haven't applied the Merdeka curriculum. This was the result of 2024 analysis. But the recipient of the interventions or beneficiaries are higher, such as PSKP, MKPK, that do not have direct interventions. Here, this means that teacher competence, the leadership of school principals play a pivotal role. In addition to that, we also took note the support from the local government, which is the Office of Education and the supervisor body. So for certain regions such as Kalimantan, with such quite good result, the education office knows what to do with their education system. So then we find that, well, in terms of the support from the education office, which is quite relevant, and that this type of finding also shared by PSKP. The case is that at the education office provided support, but it's not very targeted because it doesn't have direct implications to the quality and learning process. For instance, there is one district in South Sulawesi provided support in the form of teachers training, but they have to go to Makassar. So the cost is 3-4 times much, 3-4 times more costly than having that training in their own region. So my question is, why the training has to be there? Why that becomes the solution? So that becomes our collective questions. Well, the education, the support is there. Even the region provided support, but it's not that appropriate to promote the improvement of learning process or as simple as training. But what kind of training? It is apparently a training on how to use Canva. So it's training how to present. So what we need is something that is more substantial. All right. So in terms of curriculum, we have 3 things in our finding. First is teachers' competence, leadership of schools principals, and the support from the office, education, and supervisory office. This becomes our note for our future interventions. How are we going to work on these issues for the involvement of teachers, of the education office, and the supervisor as well. In terms of numeric skill, I wonder why the quality drops for the primary educations. So in PSKP, we conducted study in 2025. Well, only in 4 districts. It's a quite a small scale study, and we chose the district based on the district with the um, with good with the highest and the poorest achievement. So there are 8 schools that we study, and we tested the content knowledge of the teacher for their mathematics skill and their pedagogical skills, and from 0 to 100 for the score of the knowledge pertaining to content, the result is at 2850. So the elementary school teachers. So we measure all elementary school teachers because according to the institution LPTK, all the teachers for the elementary school can teach from the first to the sixth grader. And then apparently the skills of teachers are very low, even below 50. Meanwhile, for the pedagogical content knowledge, it is the score of teachers is ranging from 5 to 6, which means that some of our teachers still have struggles in teaching these skills. So if I may quote the word of Ibu Rasita, it's not enough to just teach the pedagogical capacity of teachers because the problem is on the content. This is actually affirming the statement of Ibu Rasita. Ibu Rasita then wonder, when did I ever say that? And then in terms of teachers training, that it is not actually followed by the mentorship practices. After the teacher receive training, they were not being mentored on how they actually apply that. We find a lot of this in many regions, even regions that have the intervention on train the teachers. So the training was just a one-off training, nothing else after that. And the Ministry of the Higher Education tried to conduct direct training for such coding and in-depth knowledge. And we conducted survey and we visited the field relatively. They shared that what was done by the Mendik Disagnan was more helpful, but then it will consume bigger budget rather than having the teacher practice independently. But now in under GTK context, we try to develop a training from the task force because based on the finding, a lot of teachers wondering where is it from, and maybe the intervention for the KREASI moving forward is focusing on that. It's focusing on how to enhance the competence, and the training should be close to the teachers. And even though the mentorship would be provided, so such as the
leadership and teacher, it's a key word in my opinion. This is something that we need to strongly educate to convince the teacher, man, the headmaster or the principals that they're the frontliner of this because the students change over time, right? It's a cycle. And the parents, it's also a cycle. It will be changed. But then the teacher and the principals or headmaster will stay. The teacher will always be there, even though sometimes the principals are not. So, teacher is the main thing actually. But then again, the problem is not as simple like you imagine. Not only facilitating them in terms of competency and other, sometimes we are also hindered with the problem of the teacher well-being, right? Let's say that we ask them to run with us, another turns out that the teacher will still trap. They still have several challenges. So what is our duty? What does Kreasi wants to make? Let's say that if there's still teacher who receive paycheck under normal wages, let's say, that's another challenges. And the infrastructure. Yeah, because sometimes the madrasa or the school building is still from wood constructions. Or if we want to relay this to the government, it still take a long time, right? Let alone another problem, a small amount of students enrollment, right? Around 30 or 20, for example, right? So the problem is not that simple actually. Even though that we implement this in Java Island. So that's the point for me, ladies and gentlemen. It means that we need to work together, but that's the point. How to have a common perceptions and leadership, and as well as needs to be teacher centered because they become the frontliner. I think that's all. Peace be upon us. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Basit, for the response. Let's just go directly to the next responder. Have two options whether we go to the program or looking at the locus first. Let's go to the locus first. Ibu Purwati, from the perspective of North Kayong or West Kalimantan district. North Kayong district from West Kalimantan. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, to invite me in this opportunity to talk about the perspective from the local level. You've Mr. Stephen visit the North Kayong, and you've known the real conditions on the local level, specifically in the North Kayong district. Ladies and gentlemen, it is true what has been mentioned by Pa Stephen and as well as Ibu. That's the overview on the ground, be it in the curriculum or teaching practice. So in the district, there are so many teachers who didn't understand about why the curriculums change. Every time the curriculum change, what the teacher mindset, it's just about the change of policy that shouldn't be, yeah, adapt because they are confused with the new terms. They said that, oh, it's just a new project. And turns out, ladies and gentlemen, we are from the education's office in the local level. If we look at the linkage, whether we need to have GEDSI or focus on the climate change and also include with the leadership, how the teacher could carry out a differentiate learning based on data or initial data process. And this is something that it's always forgetful how to create initial instrument for the children who started the educations like the preschool or the kindergartens. So the data that we just ask, the name, the age, and then date of birth, the parents' occupations, and the address. But Have we ever actually take a data? Let's say us, we are in the local level, we're not go to that extent yet because in our mind, why do not prepare an instrument that if the parents start the enrollment, there has to be a sessions where the parent will speak to the school talking about the characteristic of children, of their children, so that there is an openness in the relationship. And after that, the school will have a data whether the children have a certain tendency or negative tendency or any potential or any disability or other because we're a lack of instrument from the beginning. So when there is no instrument utilized by the education's unit, we do not have data. Currently, it has been supported with what we call the report card data. But then, believe me, what used by the principal to do this, it's just a literacy and numeracy data. And it's not break down other tables within that. What's causing the literacy results are red or other? What is the reflections? What kind of reflections that's wanted by the government? What are the example? So those are the thing or the concern that experienced by the teachers and principal. So yeah, like what Pa Stephen said and Ibu, you said that after the teacher assess and teaching, there's no feedback. That's true. And even sometimes the book were just stacked on the table. So this is something that we need to change. And if we look at the opportunity to get the training, it's still very limited for us in the local level. If it is said that regarding budget, yes, we need to admit that budget in our school to be able to do the skill competency for teacher apart from the school that have a very limited amount of children or students, only a few of them, and the fund it cannot support that, and the local government already support the education's operational fund supported by the local government, even though that is not that big amount because the ability of our region, but then it's not sufficient enough to support the comprehension skill of, of the teachers. But then what we can support is in the KKG. We try to, because we've assessed that we're not strong enough in financial support for improving the competency of the teacher. So we start to implement the KKG program so that the KKG program carried out by the teacher, it's not just a routine meeting. So we started from 2025. We facilitate them. We invite the teacher and as well as the committee of KKG. And there is also a class for improving a communication skill. And we also try to plan what are we going to do a year ahead. This is what we try to facilitate. And after that, we also provide another support. We're ready to provide a keynote speaker or the local facilitator. We support them on that so that, yeah, they can bear the duty during the KKG program. But then, talking about literacy and numeracy in the local level, ladies and gentlemen, if we're talking about the early childhood educations from preschool to elementary, there is a problem. The problem is that in the mindset of parents or the community in general, the considerations of children readiness to enter the elementary are just to be able to learn and to count. We found that in the early childhood educations, majority activities is just reading and writing and math. Yeah. So it's like quite serious situations like in the elementary school. Why it happened, ladies and gentlemen? Turns out that because due to the factor in the elementary school, the guideline book used by the teacher or the book that is, a long time ago. It's the book it's that have a long narrative. So we are from the ministry, request from the ministry, it needs to be reminded for the publisher of books, please do not publish a book in the earlier class with a lot of vocabulary, very long sentences, or very long passage. So that's why, ladies and gentlemen, in the elementary school, yes, that's very true. In the beginning, the children were not able to write and read, were considered, this is the unintelligent children. It's like that. If the children are unable to read, they said that, oh, these children couldn't step up to the next class. So, due to the unavailability of data and the teacher who do not understand or know how to note it about the finding that has been done, and then so that the children who are slow learner and other, there is a refusal happens in the public school, despite due to the, yeah, lack of understanding of the teacher due to a different characteristic of students and how to handle them. So that is our, Ibu, since you are on behalf of the local government, so what is the implications and expectations for Kreasi moving forward? Yes, because we also want to express our gratitude to become one of the target of interventions of Kreasi program. We're very supported with the program of Kreasi so that this teacher could um, get some training. And then, moreover, in the future, the practice about how to draft the differentiate learning, how to manage data that is based on either the value on the education's unit or the data regarding the community. How to be a teacher who are truly able to implement the differentiates learning. And if we look at the program in Kayong, it has been mentioned, oh, Kayong is good already. They've been implementing the climate change learning. It not just because the local governments. So the educations of climate change and environment, it's due to collaborations by involving the related office, like the Office of Health, Office of Environment, and others, and as well as from BPMP. From drafting or initial drafting, we also train the teacher how to make the syllabus and teaching learning and as well as the books. But then in teaching the climate change, a teacher so the teacher consider that if there's any new program such as the climate change educations, they said that this is a new burden for them, something different. Turns and we confused that. They said that, oh, we're confused, ma'am. One side is literacy, numeracy, and climate change. But then everything, it's all the same that can be integrated into a teaching lesson. And after that, one of the extracurricular is also made as the climate change material. And it is very varied. From this baseline study, we do really hope that it can help us. We're the one who still need a guidelines or a stimulus or in training as well. We're like a preschool student. When this is something new for us, we need a stimulant because our cognitive can still be, triggered. Okay, thank you very much, Ibu, for North Kayong. Last but not least, perhaps from aspect program, Ibu Rasita and Ibu Murni. please respond to that. But specifically, how the similar problem occurred, and then both of you all have experienced this as well. What about the implications of design interventions and how is it look like, supposed to look like? Thank you very much for the opportunity, and perhaps I will start with the point to appreciate this study and as well as to confirm the finding that has been discussed a lot. It also validates this finding. And one thing that I considered relevant for innovations, it is the finding related to the gap in relations with the preparations to start the elementary school, because the finding showed that the gap on the readiness to start the elementary, yeah, and then the gap still happens if, yes, until the elementary school. This is something that we need to pay attention to, and it can also be a significant input for KREASI and for other stakeholders. In relations with the program, what the program should do, perhaps I might start with the aspect that can be sharpened in the analysis of the study, and this is more likely for the PSKP. The first one related to the analysis for the SLA or the test of literacy and numeracy, because this is feels like quite general, yeah, low literacy, low numeracy. But then if we have a deeper analysis, because in the SLA there are domains, and we can see in more detail, say that based in our finding for the domain that have a basic nature for the literacy, for example, it did not have any problem. But then by the time start to enter a higher level that require a critical thinking, then the result is far from satisfactory. And numeracy as well. There are domain of knowing and applying. So they know, but then how that they can apply. If I'm not mistaken, Masnu or other also mentioned about this. Once it is implemented or in the daily context, it's still difficult for them to do. And actually, the SLA result, it can become an evidence, say that turns out that the children do not have readiness to answer the questions that have or hot questions. And this is very helpful for a kreasi later on to think about the training module, how the training modules looks like, so that the capacity building regarding literacy and numeracy doesn't feel general. But then please use this evidence to support kreasi in order to develop the module on addressing the gap, the real gap. Because based on our finding, literacy and numeracy, if PSKP found the same thing and the analysis need to be sharpened, I'm so sorry for misspell the PSKP. So if the trend is still similar, literacy and the score and the skill will be increased in line with the classroom abilities as well. But it's not the same with numeracy. The higher the class, and then the result will lower. Why? Moreover, in the knowing, even in the knowing of numeracy, it's getting decreased and decreased. Because why? Because the subject of numeracy in the higher classroom, it's more complicated. And the concept is more complicated. Not only, they start to know about multiplying, decimal, statistic, geometry, and other. So even from the concept of knowing, it's more complex. Let alone it is starting to applying those concepts to be able to solve a problem. Yeah, that makes in the SLA, because we use the same instrument. And then you can clearly, yeah, see the gap where previously the children able to answer what 2 times 4, but then if it is more complex or it turns into narrative in the forms of questions, then it's hard for them to answer. So I don't really know about the instrument that is utilized, but then we can see the linkage between the teacher practice and the result of the literacy and numeracy tests. Like what we found, for example, turns out that the teacher do the formative assessment, but then if we ask them questions, why do you need that? And then they said that it's just to monitor the students' progress. Very few of them that use the data about how to develop the strategy so that in line with the student need, so that it can improve the learning process or to think about the correct strategies or other. So they said that it's just for monitoring the students' progress. It's for the interest of the teacher. It does not make the teacher will focus on the student's interest. Since we have a qualitative data as well that was taken by the PSPK, there's a lot of item that can be linked to calculate what are the problems or to think about what are the real problem. And then after that, even though that, yeah, you can think about interventions or any training that is more suitable so that this study can be more holistic and the analysis can be deeper. And the second thing for the PSPK, explicitly saying about the limitations of this study. We have to be aware drawing the conclusions. For example, when SLS do not really considered impactful, but then once I read the report, there is a variable that was dropped in order on developing the index of SLS because most of the data are actually the variable of the income and spending of the family, right? Meanwhile, in other places, the SLS have a bigger impact and consistently show that the limitations or the huge gap that happen. Perhaps the statement about these limitations will help people to be more vigilant to draw conclusions and as well as KREASI looking at the implications of these conclusions. And the next one, it relates, yeah, there is a best practices that has been mentioned. We also learned about the best practices about the climate change. Turns out can be running. There is a lot of best practice from other places, and I think it will be better. Of course, KREASI and Save the Children have a best practice. We're not starting from zero, but then there are new things by other institutions. One of the recommendations is about how to involve the LPTK. LPTK, it's very important because they produce a new teacher, right? So sometimes it's circling around with the same problem. I think it's going to be better for the LPTK to become the partner of KREASI. From Inovasi experience, LPTK, it's very open even to improve the curriculum like literacy, numeracy, mother tongue, disability that we support. Some of the teacher training in it institute can also put that into curriculum, and then they can also include that into a program like the teacher training program. It is influenced by how the students or the university students can teach about, yeah, literacy, numeracy, and they can become a partner of KREASI program as well. So there are so many ways that can be utilized.
As I noticed that moderator look at his clock, so I become self-aware. I will end here. So I'll hand this back over to Kreasi. Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Rasita. Ibu Murni from Tanoto Foundation. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you still keep your spirit high as I am the last discussant. I already got an inspiration from all of them. I have 5 points, but it's probably a duplication from the previous presentation. So first, thanks to KREASI, PSPK. Congratulations for the completion of the study. What a rich data you've collected. I was amazed. And we actually got to reflect your result against what we've done in the Tanoto Foundations. I have 5 points. First point has been covered by Ibu Rasita so perfectly. So when we look at the result of students against the 8 districts, apparently we also see the same result in terms of trend in the area where we're working in. When we are operating in Sumatra, in Java, and I also want to echo the idea of Ibu Rasita because when we look at numeracy, if we really look at the result of the numeracy skills of the students, apparently our students have problem in the multi-level numeracy, and then in the narrative in the story problems or narrative quizzes. So then we have homework on how teachers can use the right method, right visuals, a right case. So the intended learning process in accordance with the student's capacity can be met. And earlier you also mentioned, Pak Lukman, about the pedagogical learning content. It's about how subject should be taught. So math or numeracy should be taught according to the numeracy principles. That's what we do. What we want to challenge is the recommendations of the SPK. For instance, in the early childhood facility, what needs to be prioritized is the literacy and executive or motoric skill. In our foundation, when we say it as foundational numeracy and literacy, the learning is not on the numeracy itself. In fact, my colleague here said that why the trend looks odd. Oh, okay, why the numeracy skill of the elementary student drops? So maybe we need a deeper study because especially in Indonesia, the study on numeracy is very very limited. So let's not just get that the subject that is being prioritized in PAUD is the numeracy and the literacy and the motoric skills. So let's not exclude the numeracy part. I also noticed that what you analyze is the capacity of the students and compare them with the socioeconomic status of their parents. But I want to also expand the definition of inclusions. When we talk about inclusion, a lot of times we chat about gender disability and whatnot. But is it possible that we will have analysis on the capacity of the students in our foundations? A lot of data look at the disaggregate data of students based on their capacity. Apparently the level of the non-readers can reach up to 10%. Well, depends on the regions. So let us not exclude the students. This is what we also strive to do with UNICEF. It's about how we provide more extra support for students who need extra help in terms of their numeracy and literacy capacity. So yeah, we are doing work with UNICEF, right, Ibu Tess? It's about how do we support affirmative action for the students who need them. So maybe also look at the distribution of an outliers. What's the proportion of the students who actually in a dire need of help? Okay, so I've mentioned 3 points already. 2 points left. So other point that is about, okay, so we are actually doing data-driven school leadership. We're doing it with LPI. And then, Stephen, you mentioned that when we jointly look at the data of the school principals, but not on the administrative level only. We look at the pattern of the development. We always look at how many times the school principals will make a visit, how many times the school principal will provide mentoring. So when you share your data, I love the fact that you actually strip off so many more layers. But can we look at the leadership of the school principals, but on the quality of leadership? It's not just about whether they lead or not, but look at what really matters. It's going back to if Bu Parwati talk about data, can we collect data that really matters, especially the school principals? I'm sure Mas Patria will agree because the first time we work with Patria, we understand that for administrative side, it has been the criteria for administration. It has reached 100%. All of the school principals doing that, but let's deep dive on the quality of the leadership. So fourth is on policy. If I look at the data, a lot of your data raise about the umbrella regulations. But I would like to take this back to what really matters. Pak Lukman share about what type of policy that really matters. So it's about what kind of change that we want to see at classroom level and students level, and then bring that to the policy level. So start from classroom. And how do we actually expand it to the system level, to the level of system, so that becomes our homework? How are we going to issue targeted regulations and truly support our teachers? A bit of data from me. I do have my partner here, Lita. Lita and I have policy climate study on numeracy and literacy. So we studied the 14 district in Indonesia, and we study what kind of policy they have to support literacy, basic foundational literacy and numeracy. So many regulations that support literacy are in place, and they are normally issued by the local education office or the library office. But we don't really see policy that support a more holistic literacy and numeracy educations. In addition to what you shared from PSPK, it's another nice evidence to have. This is my last point. Mbak Fatia talks about the education system. So it's actually revert back to the comment of Pak Abdul. So when we talk about system surrounds the child. A lot of times schools are mentioned, but actually it takes a village to raise a kid. So when you talk about school system, student system, parents are part of the circle. That's why we find in Taunoto Foundation the most impactful levers, in addition to teachers' capacity, are the involvement of parents. The involvement of parents even much stronger than the socioeconomic status. It reverts back to the point of Pak Abdul about how can the program engage the parents. That's from me. Thank you. Great point. Thank you, Ibu Murni. I have a very long note. I don't want to take more of your time. So now I would like to give opportunity to audience as well. And I know a lot of you represents institutions, agencies that have inputs for future KREASI studies. But for time efficiency's sake, well, it's it's already over 4 o'clock. So please extend the committee to 4:10, I guess. So maybe we can have 5 questions. Make your question brief, make your questions direct. So yeah, 1 question or 1 response. The first 3 response, I guess, for our first opportunity. Yes, from this lady first. Thank you for the opportunity, Pak Patria. we are from IGI, Association of Indonesian Teachers. We are partnered with KREASI for South Nias development. I also once become the resource person for KREASI on the material of the subject development for literacy and numeracy in early educations or PAUD. I followed the presentation of Pak Lukman Solihin, Pak Abdul, and other discussants here on the recommendations of policy system. Previously, we had movement of PAUD SD transition. This movement works to strengthen the transition on the early phase, which is first and second grade. This uh, stage is very important in strengthen the foundations for the students. And then for the presentation, then about 2.1% out of the 180 schools, students never participate in early education. And so Ibu Parwati mentioned about the demand of making sure that all of this preschool grad the should have mastered the reading, writing, and numeric arithmetic. Apologize, and this actually relates with the comment of Pak Lukman Solihens. Some government programs, maybe from the terminology or others, can synergize or can be aligned. So the direction for the teachers on the ground are actually in line with the national directions. I'm Ika Putri from Indonesian Teachers Association. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Ibu. So apparently we have representative from the MPL. Maybe we will hear comments from other MPL. Next is Ibu Kresti from UNESCO. Good afternoon. I am Kresti from UNESCO. Congratulations for the completion of study. Congratulations to KREASI and PSPK. So now I'd like to share to you that UNESCO, supported by GPGIX, is currently conducting research on gender and data in Indonesia. And one of the target regions for the gender and data is on the Pesisir Barat. Well, in our research, we are supported by advisory groups, whereby a lot of you here are also involved in that research. So we visited Pesisir Barat and tried to make alignment with other GP program. One of the observations that we made, also supported by you here, is that apparently gender issue seems to be looked as a different issue, but when we visited Krui and Pesisir Barat, apparently oftentimes emerge issues that don't look like gender issue, but very much close to the gender issue. Because in our workshop, we don't just speak with the education office, we spoke with social office and PP office. For instance, in classroom, library, or reading space for students, more often than not visited by the female students. Maybe the culture of literacy of male students are still very lacking, but it doesn't end there. It's not about how women become more superior than men, but it's about how we support male and female all together. And sometimes we look at that as a very simple issue, but it's actually part of the gender lens. So most of the study that we conducted, focusing more on the data on the how education report is being used and how is that report have a linkage with other data. So what I would like to propose to be considered by KREASI is probably attach those interventions that is not very clear to you. It might be quite minor, but have a very strong, let's say, approach, can be part of the intervention. And when you analyze the data, you can also consider other data apart from the education ecosystem data. Even though what you tried was very good, you efforted to also capture data with gender lens. We are also conducted research. We visited 6 areas, not just national level. We're happy to share you our results and cross-link the results of our study. Thank you, Ibu Kresti from UNESCO. Ibu Tess from UNICEF, over to you, Ibu.
In English, otherwise my bahasa will go very slow. But I would like to pick on what Basid said. Let's sit together and discuss the issues, because the conclusions could sound very encompassing. Because I think the study is very rich, really. But they presented it maybe because of the time limitation into overall. But actually, you do not see the real issues in the 8 districts. So what I am recommending, maybe, because if the baseline will inform the actual intervention, you need to do a lens on the district that you are intervening. Like, for example, why is SLA, the result of the student learning assessment, good in NIAS versus it's very bad in the other districts? So you need to have that lens. Therefore, like, for example, we need to, actually, Ibu Rosita mentioned it, if I understood right, in the English translation. No? We really need to look at the learning domain, which you need to address, so that the intervention will be successful. Otherwise, we cannot do one size fits all. And also, you might need to aggregate the schools if there are madrasa schools. If there are, I haven't heard the answer to that question. If there are madrasa school, then presumably we need an analysis of the madrasa, the small school versus the big school, so that the baseline really informs the intervention. So that's one suggestion. And then our organizations are doing a lot of research, like teacher counseling. We have that in our GPE systems capacity grant. School leadership, we also have that. Gender, we have that. Analysis of rapport pendidikan, the gender lens. Pa Lukman, we have a consultant sitting with you under our GP. So I'm really glad that we are here together, and I PSPK and plan. Let's put together more of this kind of dialogue, because it really helps us move together and maybe focus on what we can contribute in as per what our organization can do. I think that was also Kresti's point, no? Okay, thank you so much. Over to the chair.
Oke, makasih Bu Tes. Ini kayaknya masukannya takut terlalu banyak dulu tapi tidak mendapatkan respon dari tim.
Okay, as I'm afraid that we hold too many inputs and not getting response from the resource person, I would like to give an opportunity first to the resource person to respond, up to you which one that you'd like to respond. Also, maybe Pak Basit can address on the data and the methodology. If you would like to respond, you may do so. And if there is opportunity also for next rounds, maybe we can do that. Okay, Pak Steven, Ibu Fatia would like to respond. Anything, any input? Thank you very much, everyone. Inputs, responses were very interesting. During the course of formulating the report, the questions addressed, convictions shared, confusions were also felt by us too. And the inputs that maybe previous study can also enrich the data can be considered as well. And pertaining to madrasah, RA data is chosen proportionally. So for RA education, for RA, for elementary school, for madrasah, we took a proportional number based on the populations of these education providers in that areas. But compared with the elementary school, the number of madrasah Isanawiyah might diverse from one regions to other regions, but we also look a proportion of MA, ME, MA, MI, and hopefully they are quite representative in terms of sample that represent the schools in that areas. But actually more of this can be read in our report. If you are keen to read more, you can actually look at it on our report. No more? Okay. So should we open another round of questions? I just want to make sure that we also accommodate questions from online participants. I don't want them to bother joining virtually and not given any opportunity. So this question is directed to Pak Steven, Ibu Fatia. There are several questions coming from the online participants, one NPL as well. Pak Mansur in Morotai. Question is, what would be the advocacy steps to the district education office so school principals can consistently commit to the mentorship and assistance to teachers in school? Maybe you can share from your experience meeting school and school teachers and principals. And next, from the 13 SDMI in Morotai that are participating in the acceleration of reading program, as this is part of the KREASI design in the first year. It was identified that hundreds of students were not recognizing letters, but after interventions in January, the number dropped. So only 6 from that amount original total. The problem is the 6 students, even though have received interventions from teachers, still unable to recognize letters. So this can be something that we can study in the next intervention design. So maybe effort is there, but results is not, the implementation is not effective yet. So this is first questions in terms of the advocacy by the school principals. So we from PSPK, the role is to conduct study. So what we provide is data in terms of the concrete solutions, the to-do list for schools. I find that the entire KREASI and MPL need to think of it very contextually. It might diverge from one district to another. There might be factor of culture or paradigm that requires specific methods. Meanwhile, again, us as PSPK only conducted study, only providing data, and hopefully you can use this data. You can use the data for the strategy of each MPL. And next question is, well, it's more on responding to the input coming from discussion. Actually, there is a decline after CUC compared to before CUC. There are there are 6 students that still not meet the threshold. Ibu Murni, Ibu Rasita input was very interesting. So we need to deep dive the diagnostic assessment result. What's lacking and out of the 6 students, I mean, on the 6 students, maybe we should perform different treatment. Well, from 119, we dropped the number into 6, but the 6 students need probably specific intervention. Maybe you can look further what kind of component, what kind of areas that would need strengthening from these students. And from then on, maybe you can look at or maybe think about what kind of interventions that might be done by teachers or KREASI. All right, it seems like we should have closed the Q&A session due to the interest of time. So as moderator, I would like to extend my utmost appreciations to Ibu and Bapak for your comprehensive presentation and to all the discussion, Pak Abdul, Ibu Rasita, Pak Lukman, Ibu Murni, thank you very much for your response. I also capture lots of input and that will be follow up by KREASI. And after this, there will be response in general by Ibu Alifa as a chief of KREASI. That would be all from me. If there is any shortcoming, I would like to apologize. I hope in the future the KREASI session will be organized better. And thank you very much. I'd like to hand this back over to the MC Army. Thank you very much and good afternoon. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patria, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It was very vibrant discussions, very interactive. We do really hope that the learning that has been portrayed in this baseline study, it will bring a reflections for all of us about what we're going to do next, and as well as improving the quality of educations for our children in the future. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the end of our event for today. On behalf of all the committee and the organizer, we would like to convey our grateful for your contributions, ladies and gentlemen. As a closing, we are going to listen the closing remark that will be conveyed by the COP program of KREASI, Ibu Alifa. Ibu Alifa, the time is yours. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It was very deep discussion. So looking at the topics, to be honest, there's so many things, right? And it's also become our challenge to start this study. So between the needs and as well as the study process, it's become a very long discussions, and this is the result. We're here now. And the topic, yes, there's so many topics. Perhaps later on we can filter this to make the focus that can be run by KREASI. However, we also have a limitations. The scope couldn't be very wide. So many things that could be the focus of KREASI. One more time, I would like to convey or to express my appreciations to PSPK by conveying the result of the study and as well as all the discussions, quite comprehensive. And thank you very much your kind input. This input will be feedback for all of us for the following year of implementations. And we're going to have a discussions as well with all the partners. And yes, of course, this is going to be our homework, how it can be taken as a follow-up. And then after that, as we all know, the baseline study to identify the initial conditions of the target that will be achieved with the target of input and output. Our expectations is that in the program later on, there will be an inline and end line, and we do really hope that there will be an impact from KREASI program. I think that's all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. One more time, thank you for your time so that we can be here. And I hope to see you again in the next meeting. Thank you and peace be upon us. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ibu Alifa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me to have a limerick or pantun. Yeah, it doesn't feel right if I didn't say pantun. Roses are red, violets are blue. The initial report become a foundations to make a sustainable educations in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to inform you that the study report can be accessed through the QR code that has been provided on your table. But then if you want to visit the KREASI website, you can do that as well. So there is information on the screen, the report, presentations, and all that. Okay? And with that, we would like to say thank you very much to all the leader, the co-chair, representative from KREASI team and PSPK for the event. And I do really hope all the materials and reflections that has been shared in this forum can give a benefit and the initial step for us for a concrete follow-up moving forward. My name is Hannah, and I am Ifan, a representative of PSPK. Allow us to sign off. I'm so sorry if there's any inconvenience or mistake. Peace be upon us.